Okay, so let's get into it. Pivot tables, pivot tables, pivot tables. What exactly are pivot tables? So before we answer the question of what is a pivot table, let's take a second and describe why in the world would you want to use a pivot table in the first place. Let's start there. Okay, so the main reason you would use a pivot table is because you're going to be asking questions of a list, something like you see here on your screen. Now, I will walk you through the data here in a little while. For right now, just track with me. So let's just say you got this list and the boss walks up to you and says, "Hey, do you happen to see our region column?" Yes. "Do you happen to see our sales column?" Yes. "Well, is there any way you can tell me what was our total sales amount broken down by region?" Sure. Is it doable without a pivot table? Yes. But pivot tables make it exponentially easier. Let's move on. Let's say the boss then gets a little cutesy and says something like this. "Hey, do you see our product subcategories?" Yes. "Do you see our sales?" Yes. "Is there any way you can show me the total amount of sales for each region broken down by subcategory?" Uh-oh, that's where things get a little more complicated. But oh no, the boss doesn't stop there. Let's keep going. Then the boss says something like this. "Is there any way you can show me the percentage of profit that we have for each category?" Uh-oh. Well, here we have our shipping methods, and here we have our expenses. Could you please show me the average expense for each shipping method broken down by state? So you can see where things get a little more complicated. So to answer the question of why would you ever want to use a pivot table in the first place, the answer is you're going to be asking questions of a list. Again, I will walk you through it here in a little while. For right now, just track with me. Okay, so now we've identified why you want to use a pivot table. Let's take it one step further and talk about what exactly a pivot table is. Now, I'll be the first person here to confess to everybody that when I first learned pivot tables, they really confused me. They didn't make any sense. The problem was I kept making the definition, I kept trying to make the definition make sense. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, if you ever look up the technical definition of a pivot table, you'll see that it is technically defined as being a way for you to summarize and analyze your data. Okay, now what exactly does that mean? I don't know. The terms summarize and analyze have been so watered down, they've lost their meaning. And it wasn't until my old mentor walked up to me, and her and I were talking one day, and I have to confess, I was really struggling with what pivot tables were. And she looked at me and she said something I never forgot. And she said, "Dave, you want to recognize that pivot tables are very, very hard to describe. It's only when you see them will you understand them." And that's when things clicked. So put another way, if you walk out of this class incapable of describing what a pivot table is, but yet you can see the image in your mind, you win. Okay? That said, let me take my best attempt at describing what a pivot table is. Okay. So whenever you work with a pivot table, you want to think you're going to create a display or a layout of your data. You're going to create an arrangement. All right, now what exactly does that mean? Well, let's just say you decide to quit the whole corporate scene and pursue your life stream of selling hardware products all across the country. So you're going out there and just selling your stuff. You're selling your cogs, your gadgets, your sprockets, and your widgets, north, east, south, and west, all across the board. And then one day you ask yourself, "Man, how much sprockets I sell in the north? How much cogs I sell in the east?" Well, what you can do is you can create a pivot table that you can then create an arrangement or a layout or a display of your data that then lets you see how much of X product you sold in X region. Put another way, after we're done building our pivot tables, we can tell that we sold roughly $1,000 worth of gadgets in the south, and we sold roughly another 1,000 of widgets in the west. We sold roughly $1,200 worth of cogs in the east, so on and so forth. Okay? So that's what a pivot table is. A pivot table is nothing more than a way for you to create an arrangement or a display of your data. That's it. Okay, moving on. So now that we understand that a pivot table is a way for you to create an arrangement of your data, let's talk about the operative word, which is the word pivot itself. What exactly does that mean? Well, if you look at the word pivot in a non-Excel context, it means what? You swivel, twist, rotate, move around. So the whole idea behind a pivot table is you create an arrangement of your data, and then what you do is you look at it, and then all you do is you just move things around to create a whole different display. And then once you're done with that, you then rearrange things to make it look like a whole different display. And then what you do is once you're done with that, you then swivel things around to create a whole different display. And then ready, wait for it, here it comes. Once you're bored with that, you then pivot your data to make it look like something else. So the whole idea behind a pivot table is you create an arrangement of your data, you then move it around to create different displays, and that's pretty much about it. That's all that you do. Okay? All right, let's get into it. So let's go back here and take a walk through our data so you understand what we're dealing with here. Okay, so in our case scenario for today, what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that you got a job working at a dog food company. And yes, I'm not afraid to admit that I'm a big dog person. I own 2 dogs and they are awesome. Thank you very much. Anyhow, so what you see here is a list of orders that people place throughout time. It's completely fictitious data. And yes, you can download a copy of it in the description below if you want to follow along. But let me walk you through this regardless. So again, the idea is you've got a list of your data. Every line item is an order that somebody placed. And you can kind of see we've got a whole bunch of stuff here. So pretty comprehensive data set. That's cool. So let's take a look at the details they keep track of. So you see here where they keep track of the product category and the subcategory. All right. So what's the category? That's the top level. So if you're working at, let's say, a big name pet food company or big name pet company, I should say, what are the categories you deal with? Dog, cat, fish, reptile, bird, etc. Okay. So that's a category. Here it's just related to the dogs. The subcategory, what is that? That is just a breakdown of the category. So for example, if you happen to be working at a big name pet company, let's say you work in the aquatics department, the subcategories would be something to the effect of, I'm going to be working with freshwater, saltwater, brackish, things along those lines, types of fish. Fun. Okay. State, I cannot complicate that any further. It's just a geographic territory. The region happens to be the geographic region that the state falls into. So just think Northeast, Southwest, Central Pacific, you get the idea. The newsletter, what exactly is this? This is how the customer found us. So example, imagine you're at checkout, the person behind the counter says something to the effect of, hey, how'd you hear about us? And then you respond with, I heard about you through Facebook ads. I heard about you through a web advertisement, your newsletter, something along those lines. Okay. So that's the customer source. Order date and ship date. I cannot complicate that any further. Very straightforward. The method, what is that? The method happens to be how that product was sent out. So think standard FedEx 3-day, you get the idea. All right. No big deal there. And then we have a bunch of numbers, completely fictitious. So the expense, what's that? That is just symbolic of how much it costs us to process that order. Okay. So whatever that is. Quantity, I cannot complicate that. Unit price, that's how much that product costs. Sales happens to be the quantity times unit price, and the profit happens to be the sales minus expenses. Okay, that's all that really is. So again, the boss walks up and starts asking us all kinds of crazy questions. Well, what was our total sales for each region? Oh no. What was our average sale for each subcategory? Oh no. All right, so now we talked about the data. Let's go through and let's talk about how to build pivot tables. Okay. So you want to recognize going into this that there are several ways you can build pivot tables. So if I happen to show you something that is contrary to the way you were taught prior to watching this video, you want to recognize you're not trained wrong, just trained differently. Okay, there's various ways to create pivot tables, at least probably 5 or 6 off the top of my head. So if you happen to know another method, totally cool. My goal here is to show you the most common and most direct method. Okay, so how you do this? Step 1, you want to click inside the body of your list somewhere. Step 2, very important tip for you. What you want to do is if you ever work with a list of data, you want to make sure that you take the column headings and you make them bold. Okay. Now, there's several reasons behind this. Not going to get too into it. Yet the 2 main reasons are this. Number 1, you build in clarity. People can look at the column heading and they can discern the top of the list or the column labels or the column headings versus the body of the list. More importantly, though, what you're really doing is you're building in functionality. Okay. Why? Because when you take these column headings and you make them bold, you're actually telling Excel that these are your field names. So column labels equal column text equal fields. They're all the same thing. I'm not a big fan of terminology, although I will use it when I don't have much choice. This is one of those instances. So column headings equal fields. All right. Okay, now I got that out of the way. So getting back on point. How in the world do you create a pivot table? Step 1, as I mentioned, click somewhere inside the body of your list. Step 2, you want to cruise up and click on the Insert tab. Step 3, over here on the far left-hand side, you're going to see where it says Pivot Table. So just Insert Pivot Table, click that. Now Excel will come back and give you a couple choices, all right? So what's going on here? Well, first off, the main reason you click inside the body of your list is because when you fire up your pivot table, Excel will automatically detect the boundaries of your list. Put another way, clicking inside the body of your list bypasses or saves you the time of having to go through and highlight the entire list, which can really stink some days. That is no fun, especially with large data sets. The next thing Excel wants to know is, where do you want to put the pivot table? On a new worksheet or an existing sheet? There are all pros and cons, various schools of thought as to which way is the best way to do this. I'm going to go with the new worksheet for today and just accept the defaults. I'll click OK. Excel will wave speak Dave. Excel will wave its magic wand, and we now get this. Okay. So what's going on here? Well, if you're new to pivot tables, odds are your eyes are looking over here on the far left-hand side. Okay. I suggest you bypass that and rather focus over here what's on the right-hand side. So what's going on over here? Well, if you notice this little pane, that's P-A-N-E, not P-A-I-N. No homonyms, please. Sorry, I couldn't resist. That's a terrible joke. Sorry. That's the kind of highbrow comedy you're going to get in today's session. Anyhow, getting back on point. So if you notice this little pane over here, it actually has two sections. This upper portion, what this does is this shows us all of the labels or the fields from our list. So these are all of our column headings or our fields from the list. And then down here, you have these four quadrants: filters, columns, rows, and values, of which we will talk about throughout today's session. The way you build your pivot tables is what you want to do is you take the field in question and you drag it into one of these four quadrants. All right. Now, I do recognize all kinds of questions come out, especially when people start thinking like, okay, what field goes where? I will address that down the road. For right now, just track with me. Okay. So here's another suggestion for you. This is the part of the class where people look for what I often refer to as technical-based training. Okay, so what exactly is technical-based training? Well, technical-based training is when you're taught that a process has certain steps. So, for example, task A is always done steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Task B is always done steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Task C, steps 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. All right. Is there any downside to technical training? No. The only real downside to technical training is, think about it. If by chance you can't do step 2, by default you can't do step 3. Why? Your training will not allow it. So think about it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. Step 2 ain't done. So if step 2 is not done, you cannot do step 3. Okay? So don't focus on what I refer to as technical training or techniques on how to build pivot tables. Rather focus on what I refer to as a principle or principle-based training. Okay, so what exactly is a principle or principle-based training? Think of a principle as being, whenever you apply a principle, you get a certain reaction. So you apply principle A, you get reaction A. You apply principle B, you get reaction B. You apply principle C, you get reaction C. So is there any downside to using principles? No. The only real downside to using principles is they lack structure and they lack form. So put another way, when you apply a principle, you always get the same reaction. All right. So why am I going on about this? Well, here's why. In a few moments, you're going to recognize that one request from the boss can be interpreted 4 different ways. Put another way, one question can give you 4 possible pivot tables. Which one's right? I don't know. Which one's wrong? You tell me. Let's get into it. All right. So the way it works is we'll focus on these rows and columns quadrants first. Generally, the way it works is the fields that go into the rows and columns quadrant happen to be text or text-based fields. So what exactly is a text-based field? Well, a text-based field is just a fancy way of saying it's a field or a column that's made up of letters. So for example, if I go back here to my list, you notice that we have what? Here's some text, here's some text, here's some text. You have a bunch of text-based fields. That's not that difficult. Okay. So generally speaking, columns and rows are where you'd place a text-based field. Is that always the case? No, it's just a general guideline. Down here where it says values, what exactly is this values quadrant? Well, this is where you would put any type of field that is numeric in nature or a field that you want to do a calculation on. So let's go back to our list and take a look. Going back to our list, what are some of our numeric fields? Well, we've got what? Expenses, quantity, unit price, sales, profit. Okay, so can we do calculations on those? Obviously we can. So these are some of the ones that we can do some fancy math on, of which we'll get into. Okay, getting back on point, let me go back here to sheet 1. Okay, so now we've identified these three quadrants. I will talk about the filters quadrant in a little while. So for right now, let's focus on these three quadrants. Okay, so the first request from the boss was to show the total sales for each region. So what I'm going to do is I'll take my region field and drag it down here into my rows quadrant. Okay. Now, if we pause for a second and you look over here on the far left-hand side, something's happening. Well, what's happening? This. Okay, well, what exactly is this? Well, what Excel did is when we put that region field into the rows quadrant, it went over to our list, it locked in on the region column, and then what it did is it said, okay, you have a bunch of Mid-Atlantics, you've got a bunch of Southeast, you've got a bunch of Northeast, you've got a few things repeated over and over, but in the end, you only have 3 unique or 3 distinct regions. That's all. So it's showing us our unique items. That's all that's happening here. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay. Next, boss wanted to see the total sales. So we'll go over here and I'll take our sales and drag it right down here into where it says values. Okay. So when we put the sales value into the values quadrant, this happened. Okay, well, what's going on here? Let's break it down. So what happened was when we put that sales amount into the values quadrant, Excel went over to our list and it found all the occurrences of the Mid-Atlantic. So right there's a couple right there, one there, a few there, a couple there, blah, blah, blah. So it found all the occurrences of the Mid-Atlantic. It then jumped over and it took that individual sales amount for that sales for the Mid-Atlantic. So a couple here, Mid-Atlantic sale here, a few here, wherever. So it took all the Mid-Atlantic sales amounts, added them up, and then it shows us the, dare I say, aggregate total of the sales in Mid-Atlantic. Put another way, we can tell at a glance that we sold roughly $10,000 worth of product in the Mid-Atlantic. We sold roughly 12 grand in Northeast. We sold roughly 12 grand again in the Southeast. And there you go. Okay. Super simple, basic pivot table. Let's keep cruising. Let's make another one. So I'm going to go up here and click on Pivot Table Analyze, clear all, and we'll start again. All right. So now let's just say the boss wants to see the total sales for each subcategory. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we'll take our subcategory and we'll drag it down here where it says rows. And then we're going to take our sales and then drag it over here where it says values. Okay, well, what's going on here? Well, same thing as before. So what happened was when we put the subcategory down here into the rows quadrant, Excel went over here and it listed all of the unique or distinct items from our list. Put another way, it went over here to our data. It found all the occurrences of blankets. It found all the occurrences of small bags, et cetera, et cetera. It said, hey, we got a bunch of stuff repeated over and over again. But in the end, we only have these 12 distinct items. Okay, not that bad. Then what Excel did was when we placed the sales amount into the values quadrant, it did the same thing as before. Well, what's that? Well, it went over to our sales data. It found all the occurrences of the blankets. So right there's one, Let's see here. Right there's one. Right there's one. Okay, so it found all the occurrences of the blanket, took the individual sale amount, whatever it happens to be, added them up, and showed it to us right here. So put another way, we can tell at a glance we sold roughly $5,700 worth of blankets. Okay, not that bad. Let's up the ante. Let's go up here and click on Pivot Table Analyze, clear all. So now let's just say the boss wants to see the total sales for each subcategory and region. Okay, well, how do we do that? Well, first thing we're going to do is we'll take our subcategory and we'll drag it right down here into where it says rows. And then we're going to take our region and drag it over here where it says columns. Okay. So let's pause for a second. What's going on here? Well, same thing as before, just with a little twist. So what happened was when we put the subcategory into this rows quadrant, Excel listed out all the unique occurrences of the subcategory. Okay. And the twist was when we added the region into the columns quadrant, it listed out all the regions going out in this direction. Okay. So phrased differently, Excel's doing nothing more than creating a layout or a display, or dare I say, a wireframe of our data. Subcategories listed in this direction, Mid-Atlantic listed in that direction. No big deal. Okay, let's keep cruising. So the boss wanted to see the subcategory and region. Got that done. Now, boss wants to see the total sales. So we'll take that and drag it right down here where it says values. Okay, letting go. Ha! What's going on here? Oh, no. So what the heck is happening here? All right, well, Excel did the same thing as before, just with a little twist. Okay, what's the twist? Well, let's take a look at our numbers first. If you notice, we sold roughly $1,900 worth of blankets in the Mid-Atlantic, and we sold roughly what? $770 of treats in the Southeast. So how did Excel get those numbers? Well, what it did was this. It went over to our list, and let's take a look. Let's say the Mid-Atlantic blankets in this occurrence. So what it did is it went through a list, and it found all the occurrences of the blankets in the Mid-Atlantic. Right there's one. Blankets Northeast, nope. Blankets Southeast, nope. Blankets Mid-Atlantic, yep. Blankets Mid-Atlantic, yep. It found all the occurrences of the blankets in the Mid-Atlantic. It then jumped over and took the individual sale amount, wherever it happens to be in our list, added them up, and showed us the, dare I say again, the aggregate total of our data. So put another way, we can tell at a glance, we sold roughly $1,900 worth of blankets in the Mid-Atlantic and $770 of Southeast treats. Okay, not that bad. But wait, we haven't even talked about why it's called a pivot table. So remember, pivot by definition means what? Swivel, twist, rotate, move around. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to pivot my data. So remember, pivot just means rearrange or move. In this occurrence, what I'm going to do is I'll take the region and drag it down here and put the subcategory up here into the rows. I'm sorry, take the subcategory from the rows and put it into the columns quadrant. All right, so what's going on here? Well, you can tell by looking at it, it's a little different, okay? But here's the thing. It's the same data displayed a different way, and that's the catch, or that's the key. So how do we know everything's the same? If you take a look at our Mid-Atlantic blankets, still $1,900, and the Southeast treats is still $770. Okay, it's not that bad. We can hang with that. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot my data again. So keep your eyes lower right-hand side, please. I'm going to take my subcategory, drag it down here, and we'll drag our region back up here into the columns quadrant, and now we're back to where we were. Okay, hopefully this is making sense to everybody so far. So again, all you do with pivot tables is you create arrangements of your data, and then you move things around. That is all that you do. Simply that. Okay, let's take it one step further. Now, you want to recognize that there are no rules that say you cannot put multiple fields in multiple quadrants. All right. So do me a favor, keep your eyes lower right-hand side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the region field into the rows quadrant. Now I'm going to do this 3 times. Now I'm going to try to intentionally lose you. Okay, there's a reason for this. So do me a favor, keep your eyes down here where it says region. And I'll drag it right down here into the rows quadrant. I'll let go. Just take a look at the data. Okay, just see what's going on. Move it back. Drag it down again. Okay, not bad. Drag it back. Third time. No, whoa, wait, what's going on here, Dave? Looks a little different. Let's break it down. All right. So remember, your pivot table is nothing more than a display of your data. So the question becomes, how's that data displayed? Now, getting back on point here, when I take the region field and I drag it into the rows quadrant, do me a favor, keep your eyes down there, and you want to try to look for a little green line that's bouncing up and down. Okay? What that little green line says, or what it indicates, is where the field is going to go when you let go of the mouse. So put another way, if the green line is above the field in this case, my data is being displayed by my region first, then by my subcategory. Ready? Here it comes. Same stuff displayed a different way. How do we know that? The blankets in Mid-Atlantic, still $1,900. In the Southeast treats, still $770. Okay, so that ties out. Now, keep your eyes lower right-hand side, please. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my region and I'm going to put it below my subcategory. So now what's happening? Now what's happening is my data is being displayed by my subcategory first, then by my region. How do we know that? Well, blankets in Atlantic, $1,900. And I'll bet heavily that the treats in the Southeast are roughly $770. Okay, so that checks out. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let's go back and start to tie everything together. I'm going to go up here and click on Pivot Table Analyze, Clear All. Now start again. You might remember from a few moments ago, I went off on that whole weird tangent of techniques versus principles and the differences between the two. Now let's tie it all together. So why was I suggesting you use a principle? So remember, a principle is this. It's when you do something, get a certain reaction. So put another way, when you put a field into the rows quadrant, it's displayed this way. When you put a field into the columns quadrant, it's displayed that way, so on and so forth. Let's tie it all together. So let's just say the boss walks up to you and says, hey, could you please show me the total sales for each subcategory? Okay, cool. So the question is, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean subcategory is displayed there, region there, sales there? Is that what they want? Or do they want this? Keep your eyes lower right-hand side. I'm going to pivot the data. Take the region, put it here, subcategory there. Is that what the boss wants? Or does the boss want this? Do they want this subcategory below the region? So do you want your data to be displayed by the region, then by the subcategory? Or do you want this? Subcategory first, then the region. You tell me. All right. So now hopefully you can kind of see where one suggestion can be interpreted four different ways. And the question is, which way is correct? I don't know. You tell me. All right. Okay. So let me start tying this stuff together. Right about now, here's where some folks have some questions as to what field goes where, or how do I know what field goes where, things along those lines. So let me address that. I'm going to go up here and clear my data. I'll die myself out. Now, throughout the session, you probably picked up on the fact I kept saying display and layout over and over and over again, probably to the point where some of you have gone crazy about it, and you'll probably put some comments down below about how I repeat myself. Yeah, I know. There's a reason I do that. The reason is A, reinforcement, but B, there's a deeper, more heavier meaning in a good way. So the reason I say display and layout so much is this actually comes from the person that taught me pivot tables. His name was Rob. And one day I was watching Rob build a pivot table. And I just, for whatever reason, I picked up on the fact that he kept saying display and layout over and over and over again. And Rob was good, really good, very articulate, very polished, very good at what he does. His craft was impeccable. And for whatever reason, my mind locked in on it. I was just, what's going on with this guy? So I asked him after class, and I do recognize that there is no dignified way to say this to him. So I walked up and I said, hey, Rob, I noticed you kept saying the terms display and layout over and over and over again. I said, is there a reason you're doing that? It doesn't make any sense. He then looked at me and he said, Dave, I was keenly aware of the fact I was just saying display and layout over and over again. The reason I was doing that is because I was doing my best to keep everybody focused on the superficial. I said, what? What exactly does that mean? He said, I'm doing my best to keep everybody in the superficial. What that means is, for whatever reason, people have a tendency to overcomplicate pivot tables. He said they think too deep. They think too much about them. He said, dude, it's just an arrangement of your stuff. But he didn't say stuff. Now, if you thought of something different, that's on you. Gotcha. So he said he then went over and did something like this. He said, Dave, think about it. All I did was I just took a field and I put it down here and I said, what does it look like? That's it. And then he just rearranged things to see what other types of displays he could create. That's all he was doing. I said, that's it? He goes, that's it for the most part. And the second he said that, it clicked. Things got exponentially easier. So my suggestion to you is when you go in to build a pivot table, if you go in knowing you're just creating a display of your data, that's all you're doing. Just creating arrangements of your stuff. All right. So that begs more questions. So people often say that, okay, I understand you're building displays of your data, but I'm still not sure on where to put what field. Where should I start? General guidelines. Generally speaking, the field that you want to start off with, no matter what it is, generally it goes into the rows quadrant. Okay? Why? Data is often easier to read vertically than horizontally. Okay? Is that true or is that gospel in every case? No, it's just a starting point. People say, well, all right, if you then take your sales, put it down here, I would suggest to you that this display is a lot easier to read than, let's say, this display. Now, could you get away with this? Yeah, but I'd argue that this is probably easier on people's eyes. All right. So again, just to recap, generally speaking, the field you start off with, just put it into the rows quadrant, and that's a good starting point. The other question I get very often is, well, okay, Dave, if the boss didn't tell me what fields to go with, what'd I do? My answer, as trite and plain as it sounds, just start dragging fields down here. Just see what it looks like. Why? Because that's all you're really doing. You're simply taking a field and you're going to say, well, what's this going to look like? Let's put this here. Okay. Let's put this here. Okay. Let's take the sales and put that down here. All right. Well, I don't like that. So let's put this here and put that here. All right. Well, Well, what if we take our customer source and put it down here? That's kind of heavy. Don't like that. Well, how about we take the subcategory and put that down here? What's that going to give us? Okay, not bad. Let's put the region over here. Okay, doable. All right. So I'm kind of going off here, and I do recognize that. Yet all I'm really showing you is you're just creating displays of your data. That's it. So as long as you know that going in, that's really all you need. Why? Because as you start to drag your fields down here, you'll find out that the questions will feed themselves. Because you'll start asking, well, what if I put this here? What's it going to look like? If I do this, what's it going to look like? And that's all you need. Okay? Truly all you need. Alrighty. So what's next? Let's say the filters quadrant for later. Let's talk about how to do some calculations because that's probably what most people want. Alrighty. So I'm going to create a very, very simple display. I'll take the product category. So the category is the top level. Just think dog, cat, fish, whatever. So top level, no big deal. Okay, next I'll take the sales and put that down here where it says values. Okay, get that. And I'll just bring the region down just for fun. Okay, there we go. All right, so we get this display. All right. Now, talking about calculations. The way it works is this. Whenever you put a numerical field into the values quadrant, it's going to default to the sum calculation. Okay, now I often say the aggregate sum, although I do recognize in Excel parlance that is not 100% accurate. It's just something that I say to kind of keep it straight in my mind. You can define this however you wish moving forward. So it puts a sum down here, no big deal. So how do you change the calculation if you want to? Well, here's where the fun starts. So if I cruise down here to lower right-hand side, and I hover down here where it says sum, if I click where it says sum, Excel will come back and give me a bunch of gobbledygook. How's that for a technical definition? The one we want to focus on is right here where it says value field settings. Value field settings is geek speak for I want to change the calculation. So if I choose value field settings, this little dialog box pops up. Okay. So to begin with, you see we have this list of commonly used calculations. Now, most people won't go that crazy. They'll use things like sum, count, average, max, min. Maybe count numbers. The rest of the stuff, standard deviations and variance, most likely not. So we'll go with the average just for fun. So I'll click on average here, and then I'll click on the number format just so it'll be easy on our eyes. And heck with it. Let's go with the currency display, 2 decimals, that'll work. Click OK. Normally I would change the label up here. I'll let that ride for today just so you can see what's going on. I'll click OK, and there is our average display of data. Not bad. So where we go from here? Well, it's just a matter of what do you want to do and what do you want to show. So for example, I could do something like this. If we go back to our theme of you can put multiple fields in multiple quadrants, I can take the region and drag this down here where it says rows. But why stop there? Let's take our sales and drag it down here into our values quadrant. Oh my, look at that. So now we have our average sale and our total sale. Okay, not bad. But wait a minute, I don't like that arrangement. All right, fair enough. So I'll take the sum and I'll put that above the average. There we go. Kind of rearrange it. Okay, no big deal. All right. So that begs the question of, well, what happens if you want to get rid of some of these fields? You have a couple ways you can do it. One method is you can drag it out here into no man's land and let go, and that'll get rid of it. The other option is to go up here and uncheck the box. So if I uncheck, let's say, the region, please recognize that does not delete the region from our list. It simply does not display that field on our pivot table. That's all it does. I tend to click and drag. That's just my old habit, but you can choose whatever method you want. Okay. So let me go up here and click on clear all. And now let's up the ante a little bit. Okay, so you might remember from earlier, I went through the whole rigmarole of hypotheticals the boss might come up with, all kinds of crazy scenarios. And you might remember the percentage sales of breakdown for, I think it was the region or the category, I forget which one, but let's just say they want to see the percentage sales of whatever. Okay, how do we do that? So let's go this way. Let's take the category, drag it down here. Take the region, put it there. Why? Why not? And we'll take the sales and drag it down here into the values. Okay. Now, to change the calculation into the percent, here's what you want to do. You want to cruise down here into the values quadrant, click on it, and then go under where it says value field settings. Remember, that's geek speak for I want to change the calculation. Now, you saw a screen a couple of seconds ago, but here's a subtle part. If you notice, there's actually 2 options right here. One says summarize values by, the other one says show values as. And if you click on them, you can see they change. They're very, very subtle. They're hard to see. Yet if you click where it says show values as, it defaults to no calculation. So if I click on my drop arrow, I get a whole bunch, oh, isn't that so much fun, of all these crazy calculations. Now, I'm very tempted to do a part 2 of this. You can let me know your thoughts down below. Yet for today's class, I have been going for a while, so I'll kind of keep it superficial. And I'm going to go with the option that most people can wrap their minds around easily, which is the percent of grand total. So I'll choose percent of grand total. I'll click OK. And now Excel is giving us this calculation. Okay, what's that? Well, we can tell at a glance, or we can go up to the boss and try to get some cool points. Hey, boss, check this out. Did you happen to know that 18% of our overall sales came from the dog care in the Southeast? Wow. Hey, boss, did you happen to know that 8% of our total sales came from the Mid-Atlantic Dog Food Organic? Oh, it's awesome. Do you happen to know that 51%? I can't read. Hey, boss, do you happen to know that 51% of our overall sales came from the dog care? Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How long did it take you to do that? 2 hours. Always 2 hours. Even though it only took you 30 seconds. Okay. So that's that. Now, again, if we want to up the ante and just really kind of geek out in this, we can take our region, put it down here, drag our sales down here. Let's put that above this time, show where the green line is. I'll let go. And now you get this. Okay, so what's going on here? It's showing us our total sales and the percentage breakdown. Now, again, I'm being lazy here today. In real life, I'd probably change these labels right here to something more practical, and I would change these to be like a currency format. Yet for today's class, I'm going to bypass that just to kind of save us some time because I know I have been going for a while. And I definitely appreciate you folks hanging in there. So let's keep cruising. Next up, let's talk about this little filters quadrant. All right. So I'm going to go up here and click on clear all. All right. And now what exactly is this filters quadrant? Well, the filters quadrant, you can make a very strong case that it is arguably obsolete. Is it used anymore? Depends on who you talk to. So what I'll do is I'll walk you through how it works on a traditional sense. So understand, will you encounter it in real life? Don't know. There is a new modern replacement that I'm going to show you here in a little while. Yet, for the sake of being comprehensive and full understanding, let's get into it. So what exactly is the filter? All right, so this is one of the situations where if you have used a filter prior to today, you're actually one step ahead. If you've not used a filter prior to today, that's okay. You can learn about them now. Now, you want to recognize that filters are not exclusive to Excel. You can use filters all across the board. For example, filter in Excel, obviously. You can also filter in Power Pivot and Power Query, of which I strongly recommend that you learn because employers love that stuff. You can also filter in Tableau. You can also filter in your Accesses, your SQLs, and the Oracles of the world all across the board. Very, very powerful concept. So what exactly is filtering? Well, filtering is often technically defined as being a way for you to select and display a subset of criteria. Okay, so if you're like me, you understand the words are being spoken, but you've got no idea what they're trying to say. It's like select and display a subset of criteria. What? What is that? What does that mean? Oof. All right, let's translate it. So what exactly is a filter? Question for you. Has anybody here ever played that card game Go Fish when you were a kid? Remember this? Give me all your 8s, give me all your 9s. If not, go fish. Remember that? Okay, so if you haven't played Go Fish, that's okay. Have you ever filtered in real life? Yeah, you probably have. Just didn't know it. How have you done filtering? Well, if you've ever shopped online, which I'm going to bet everybody here has done, you've filtered. Example, let's say you're trying to buy a new pair of shoes for yourself. You want a pair of sneakers. So what do? You go to your website of choice, you pull up the style, and then you say, show it to me in this color, this size, whatever. That is filtering. So filtering is nothing more than a fancy way of saying, I want to play Go Fish or give me all your fill in the blanks. So let's just say we need to filter our customer source. As a quick refresher, remember the customer source happens to be how that person found us. All right, so let's go with the subcategory here for the rows, region there. Why not? And put the sales here. Okay. So now, when I bring the customer source down here into the filters quadrant, do me a favor, keep your eyes in the upper left-hand corner. So I'll drag it down here. 3, 2, 1, let go. Now, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see this. What's this? Well, if I click on my drop arrow, you're seeing that Excel is now displaying all of our customer sources. So now what I can do is I can play Go Fish for my various customer sources. For example, show me all the people who came in through LinkedIn. Okay, there they are. All right, click on my drop arrow. Give me all your people who came in through YouTube. Okay. Show me all the people who came in through Twitter. Yeah, I know it's called X. I'm just too lazy to change the data. I get it. And I kind of think X is lame. Whatever. It's just a lame name. Whatever. Just go with it. So there's a lot of people who came in through X, Twitter, Zwitter, whatever you're calling it nowadays. I don't know. I'm just too bored with it. Anyhow, got Bing. Remember that? So anyhow, here's all of our sources. No big deal. Now, why in the world is the filter becoming obsolete or antiquated? Well, one of the drawbacks that people had with the filter is it's kind of limited. Meaning, if I go up here and I click on my drop arrow, yes, I can choose select multiple items. And yes, I can go out here and I can check certain boxes. I can say, show me who came in through Bing, LinkedIn, Facebook, our newsletter, or whatever. But you notice Excel does a very, very bad job at showing us who the multiple items are. Another way, who did I check? Well, the only way you could really find out was to click on the drop arrow itself and look, and hopefully your short-term memory will remember that stuff. Odds are probably won't. So I'm willing to bet heavily that Microsoft got a lot of complaints. Can you do something better? Now, I will fully confess to everybody here that I take shots at Microsoft incessantly. Why? I think they screw things up probably more often than not. Yet every now and then they do get something right. And this is one occurrence. So what I'm about to show you is something called a slicer. You can see it right up here on the ribbon. So what exactly is a slicer? You want to think of the slicer as being filter 2.0. This is the new and improved version of the filter. Does that mean you have to use this filters quadrant down here? No. Frankly, in real life, I very rarely do I use it nowadays. I use slicers exclusively. So it's up to you and how you do this. So I'm going to take the customer source and I'm going to remove that. Now let's talk about the slicer. So if I cruise up here and I click on my slicer, you notice I have a list of fields to choose from. If I choose customer source and I click OK, I now have this little doodad going on. Well, what's this little doodad? Well, this is really just a filter, but it just works a little differently. The way it works is to filter your data, what you do is you just click on the button as opposed to clicking on the drop arrow that was up here, put out of the way. If I click on LinkedIn, there's all the people who came in through LinkedIn. If I click on YouTube, there's all the people who came in through YouTube. It's filtering our data. Now, the cool thing is this. If I want to see multiple people, I can click on an option, then do the classic thing of hold my control key down, and then I can click on multiple whomever. There you go. And now I can see various pieces. No big deal. Now, if I want to clear this, I can go up here and clear that. And there you go. Okay. So again, I'll just choose a few here at random, et cetera, et cetera. All right. So the slicer is just the modern day replacement or the modern day enhancement or the modern day improvement of the old school filter. Now I'm going to go back here and click on my pivot table. And the cool thing is this, if I wanted to add in multiple slicers, I can. So if I go up here and click on pivot table analyze, insert slicer, I can now choose multiple things. So I can click on shipping method, click OK, and now I get this. So now what I can do is I can kind of click and choose different pieces and say, oh yes, analysis. I'm doing my analytics and summarizing and blah, 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 and whatever. You get the idea. So again, I'll click on my funnel icon just to reset everything. Do I want to leave these here? Yes or no? I'll leave them there. Why not? So I'll place this filter here. Excuse me. I'll place this slicer there and I'll place that right here. Okay. Just as a side note, if you want to play with the slicer settings, if you click on the slicer tab, there's this columns icon. So you can kind of bump the columns up to make it look a little more tame for people, because I do know they do take up a lot of real estate some days. So we'll go with that. Why not? Close enough. Okay. All right. Let's take a little bit of time and talk about this insert timeline. So what exactly is this timeline? Well, if your data has officially recognized dates, now what does that mean? If I go back here to my data, you notice I have the order date and the ship date. Okay. These are officially recognized dates. Why? It shows you day, month, and year. Another way, it does not show just the month. It does not show just the day. It does not show just the year. It is literally day, month, and year. If you have that in your data set, you can actually go up and filter your data by certain dates. So the way it works is you go up and click on Pivot Table Analyze. You then go over and you click on Insert Timeline. Excel then comes back and says, well, hey, which one do you want to filter by? In today's case, let's go with order date. Why? Does not really matter, but anyhow, let's click on order date and we get something like this. Okay. Now, admittedly, this data is not the best, so just kind of bear with it. So the whole idea with this timeline is I can go out here and I can just click and drag over a certain amount of whatever. In this case, it's a certain amount of months. So now I'm showing December of 2018 through December of 2019. I can extend it if I wanted to. Once I'm done watching that, I can click on the clear icon. You notice I have this little drop down arrow where it says months. If I click the drop arrow, I can filter or display my data by quarters and even days if I wish. I'll go with quarters for today. So let's just say I want to see quarter 2 of 2018 through quarter 2 of 2020. Right there it is. Now where things get really interesting is I can also start to integrate my slicers. I can say, well, click on that, then click on that and hold my control key down and just click a whole bunch of stuff at random just to give you an idea how this stuff works. And there you go. Okay, so I'll clear that out. Okay, so we've been going for a little while, close to an hour. I figured let me show you one more thing of where things get really interesting, and then we'll start to wind it up, and I'll do a quick recap for you. So I'm going to click on my slicers here in my timeline and press my delete key. And I'll go up here and click on pivot table analyze, clear all, get rid of that, gone. Okay. Last thing I'll show you is how to create charts in pivot tables. So for this example, let's go over here and put the category here, region there, and sales here. Okay. Now, if I wanted to, I can create charts of my pivot tables. Now, the fancy term they throw around today is something called a visualization. I don't like saying that because it's just a mouthful. So if you ever hear the term visualization, it's just a very fancy, overly complicated way of saying you're going to create a bunch of charts. That's all that means. That is not an official definition, but for today, charts equal visualizations or vice versa. All right, so how do you create your charts in Excel? Pivot tables. Step 1, you click inside your pivot table. Step 2, you want to go up and click where it says Insert, and then right around the middle of your screen, it'll say Pivot Chart. Click the drop arrow, choose Pivot Chart again, and now you have a whole bunch of choices. I'll put 2 charts in for today. It will not be the most practical. I'm okay with that. I'm doing this for demonstration purposes only. So I'll go with the column graph, click OK here. And I'll move that over here. And then I'll go up here and click in my pivot table, click my Insert tab, Pivot Chart, and let's go over here where it says Pie Graph, and I'll go the off-aligned donut graph. Why not? It looks cool. I'll choose that. Okay. So it's really the same chart of this. It's really 2 charts of the same data. Whatever. Just go with it. Now, what I can do from here is I can kind of clean this stuff up. For example, these buttons that you see here, they scream this chart was made with a pivot table. So I can go up here and I can click on, after I click on the chart, I can go under Field Button List and choose Hide All. I'll do that same thing over here, rinse and repeat. Okay. Now, where things start to get interesting is I can now start to integrate my slicers. So if I go up here and click on Pivot Table Analyze, Insert Slicer, let's see, I choose the customer source along with the shipping method. Click OK. All right. Now, let's make this 2 or 3 columns just for fun. All right, bear with me here while I move this around. I'll put that right here. Why not? Put that right here. Okay. Now, if I start clicking, things start to get a little more interesting. I can hold my control key down, do all kinds of cool stuff. And now if you see, now we have the makings of a very, very low grade dollar version of a dashboard. All right. Where we go from here, we can build a whole bunch of new charts, clean it up, make it look nice, all kinds of cool formatting. Yet you kind of see where all this stuff leads to. So let's start to wind things up. All right, so I'm going to delete this stuff here, and let's do a quick recap of everything. So let me delete the sheet while we're at it here. Yes, okay. So quick recap. Why in the world do we use a pivot table? Well, the whole idea behind using a pivot table is you're going to be asking questions of your list. Those questions can be simple or they could be complicated. Obviously, the more complicated they are, the more work you have to do. Pivot tables are going to be a good go-to. To create a pivot table, you go up and click on Insert, Pivot Table. Generally speaking, you'll accept the defaults. So just click OK. And then all you do is you just start dragging your fields around to see what your display looks like. So I'll put my customer source here, region there, and then sales here, why not, so on and so forth. So now you really understand what pivot tables are. So let me start to end up where I began. If you happen to remember when this session started, pivot tables are very, very hard to describe. So if you look over here, I'll be blunt with you. I do not have the words to describe this. I don't even know how to be candid with you. If you can, hey, you got a great career as a software trainer. Go for it. There's no money in it. Believe me. If it costs 50 cents to get around the world, I cannot get out of sight. I kid you not. But if you can put this into words, you're way better than me, and that's awesome. If you think about it, you may not be able to verbalize what a pivot table is, but you get the idea. And that's the big takeaway. So like I said earlier, if you walk out of here incapable of describing what a pivot table is, yet you understand what it is in your mind, you win. It is nothing more than creating arrangements or displays of your data. That is it. Okay? Alrighty, so we'll draw the line here. We've been going for probably close to an hour or so. So I want to take a second and say thank you so very much for sitting through this. I know this class is essentially a recording session of a live class. So please pardon any stuttering, things along those lines. So I really have to hand it to you. I know it's not easy to sit there and watch somebody do show and tell. So my hat's off to you on that one. I definitely appreciate it. Please feel free to leave your thoughts and comments below. That said, thank you again, and I'll see you next time.